Do you remember the old good Sleeping Dogs that was released way back in 2012? Was a game full of potential, enjoyable moments, a great story, solid gameplay, amazing mechanics, memorable characters, and overall an amazing open world experience. Yeah, the game that we used to know as True Crime Hong Kong that got cancelled and picked up by Square Enix and transformed into Sleeping Dogs. Overall, everything about this title was amazing, from fighting to customization, parkour, gunplay, slow-mo, and a great map. Anyway, did you know that this game was actually going to have a sequel, but it was canned in early production? If Sleeping Dogs would have had a sequel actually announced to release, it would have been an amazing sequel, that's for sure. And even if it was abandoned in early production, we still have access to some insight about this sadly cancelled project. Let's talk about it, shall we? As we all know, the Canadian-based game developer United Front Games went out of business back in November of 2016. The studio wasn't widely known over its 9-year history, but it was responsible for Sleeping Dogs, one of the most underrated open-world games of the past decade. In a just world, we'd be playing Sleeping Dogs 2. We almost lived in that world, too. Sleeping Dogs 2 was in development according to two sources of a Vice writer, and he had documents to prove it. A little while back, one of his sources passed out hundreds of documents outlining United Front Games' grand pitch for Sleeping Dogs 2 as early of 2013. Another source with connections to the developer confirmed that the documents were legitimate, but seriously they were a snapshot in time. These documents were revised, edited and iterated one before Sleeping Dogs was ultimately canned in late 2013. The game never formally entered the production phase. Sleeping Dogs 2 would have picked up after the original game, once again following the previously exploits of a formerly undercover officer Wei Shen. This time, Shen would have been joined by a conflicted corrupt partner named Harry Fang, as they explored China's Pearl River Mag City, a noted economic hub and yes, a real place. The player would have had the ability to arrest any NPC in the world and influence a bridging storyline that swept between both Shen and Fang. Here is an example of how that might have worked out. Quote, an opening scene consists of Wei and Fang talking together, discussing what the next step of the investigation should be. Deciding to split up and follow different leads, Wei threats will follow him as he busts heads for information, while Fang plants evidence by breaking into a suspect's house. Depending on the characters selected, the audience and characters will only see one side of the story until both threads are played. This gives us an ample opportunity to explore both characters fully, and gives the player the revelatory experience of discovering both sides of the story. Playing as the Inspector Jane Tang, you would, quote, manage the police force and try to control territories, and quote, from your mobile device. If you own Sleeping Dogs, your choices in the mobile game influenced what happens in the city, the gangs in control, etc. If you summoned a police patrol on a mobile device, you will see that in-game as a helicopter flying by. If you didn't own Sleeping Dogs 2, the hope was to craft an enjoyable free-to-play experience that pointed you towards the console game. It was more than that though. United Front Games envisioned a sprawling metagame it dubbed, quote, massively single-player code, where actions you took in your game busting a crime, taking a bribe would adjust city dynamics in other players' games. The specifics hadn't been worked out yet. This was all theoretical, but players could focus on their efforts on cleaning up specific parts of town as a community and turn crime-ridden places into livable neighborhoods. This would have been achieved by using the cloud saves of all players to determine the global neighborhood crime levels across all games, and then mapping the crime to the difficulty level in policing the neighborhood in the individual games. United Front Games obviously had big plans for Sleeping Dogs 2 as part of pre-production and before Square Enix had given the green light to move forward. The developers had worked on only very basic experimental prototypes. The game wasn't very far along, one source said, and at the time of this project cancellation, the core design was still very much in flux. One problem for Sleeping Dogs 2 though was Hitman and Tomb Raider had taken priority at Square Enix, which meant there was less money to budget towards any Sleeping Dogs 2. Complicating matters was how tough it was to make the original Sleeping Dogs. Though ultimately published by Square Enix in late 2012, Sleeping Dogs started as an extension of Activision's True Crime series in 2007, as I said, True Crime Hong Kong. Several of their best programmers decided to move on, and there was some creative turnover as well, said the same source. It took several years of hell to ship Sleeping Dogs, and many members of the team weren't willing to go through it all again. Chances are it was a combination of factors that led to Square Enix passing on making a proper follow-up to Sleeping Dogs, but all the sources say that United Front Games was up for it. Though Sleeping Dogs was dead, Square Enix still wanted to work with United Front Games and was intrigued by some of the multiplayer ideas they pitched. From the ashes of Sleeping Dogs 2 came Triad Wars, a free-to-play multiplayer-centric take on Sleeping Dogs. The response to a new Sleeping Dogs game without its main attraction, a crime story set in an open world, left fans disappointed before Triad Wars even had a chance to enter the beta, but its life would end soon after it was released. Triad Wars was eventually killed in January of 2016, with the studio admitting that, quote, "We know it wasn't right for many of you." The future of Sleeping Dogs, if there is any, isn't clear. Open world games are ridiculously expensive to produce, and when going up against publishers like Ubisoft, who've turned making open world games into a factory assembly line, and Rockstar Games, whose GTA 5 has sold more than 70 million copies since its release in 2013, it's a tough sell. So for now, all Sleeping Dogs fan can do is dream of what might have been. In conclusion, this was a closer look at the potential of the cancelled sequel that was Sleeping Dogs 2. I hope you find this video enjoyable. If you did, leave a like and a comment. In case you haven't subscribed, make sure to do so in order to join the fam. Follow me on IG and Twitter so you don't miss a thing, and I'll see you at my other videos. As always, have a good one, fams.
Them trees, but miss the clutch. These Romanian trees for the system's touch. Whoa, liquor is finest, your highness, German president, your highness. Wait, I'm here to slay the demons that harness, tarnus. Join us, the time is upon us. Fuck the game, just hold my PS4. I do it for my soul, so with the BS4. Me and rap, dangerous liaison. The whole game is off, use me as on.